So the big question is, how can entrepreneurs like us, women who face multiple barriers of knowledge, access, confidence, and availability, but are determined to bring ambitious ventures into the world, how can we master business and finance so we can maximize our impact in the world and yet remain true to our mission and to our values? That is the question. And this podcast will help you craft your own unique and powerful solution to this challenge. Hi, my name is Shubha Chakravarti, and this is Invisible Inc., the podcast for under-resourced women entrepreneurs. How do you start with a revolutionary technological product, no educational credentials, and $600 in your pocket, and sign up a huge name in your market? How do you stretch your time and money so far that one small order from one surprise customer opens up an entire new market for you? How do you get over self-doubt, blatant reverse ageism and sexism to create a product that literally saves lives for less than the cost of filling gas in your car? In this episode, entrepreneur and VC analyst Tayyaba Ali talks about how she strategically used pitch competitions to win a neat pot of startup cash, how she reverse engineered existing products to build a completely new, innovative product on a shoestring budget, how she learned to overcome thinking small, doubting herself, and negotiation pitfalls to bootstrap an industry-changing social impact venture, and much more. Here's Tayyaba. Good afternoon, Tayyaba. Did I say your name right?
Yes, Tayyaba.
Tayyaba. Nice. It's great to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, so we're very happy to have you here.
No, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
You have a pretty interesting background in biophysics. You founded a STEM company even before you finished college. Tell us how that story goes.
Yeah. So I guess my intent from the start was actually to be an innovator. So for me, my goal is to innovate and to make the world better. I'm very much impact driven, and I've been impact driven for as long as I can remember. So for me, it was like, all right, what's the maximum impact I can make in the shortest amount of time? And for me, that led me down the route of entrepreneurship over more like traditional corporate or even academia, just because academia is great on paper. You can make a lot of discoveries, but it takes so long to get into application and to actually be in the hands of the people that need it the most. While startup or lean startup culture, especially, it's you ideate and you go to manufacturing and you're in the hands of people under a year, under 2 years, which kind of has been my path. The first time I was like, yeah, I should totally start a business was probably freshman year of high school. That was I want to say almost 10 years ago. It's been a while. I literally took that class because I had to. It was a requirement at my school. I hated business prior to that. Took that class, became obsessed, became completely hooked on the idea of running a business and starting a business. Yeah, this makes sense. Math, finance, I can totally do this. So that was the initial bug that bit me. Then in college, I became a college dropout briefly to run one of my medtech companies. We raised a very big round for seed round, decided that, okay, no one's really going to take a college dropout very seriously in a medtech field. So I was like, okay, time to go back to school, maybe get a PhD. Went back to school. That's when I got biophysics and comp sci. And here we are now with my fourth startup. So it's been a long journey.
Fascinating. So that's, did I say this right? Tikal filters?
Yeah, Tikal was actually named after the Mayans in Guatemala. There's a city named Tikal, and they were the first people to create an integrated water filtration system. So we took inspiration from them. We wanted to keep that natural roots and give credit where credit was due.
So tell us about the company. What does it do? What's the product and what's the mission?
Yeah, so the goal behind Tikal was basically to create sustainable water filters. So we basically create and manufacture sustainable water filters to combat America's unregulated and contaminated drinking water epidemic. And we do this by turning agricultural waste into usable water filters. And then we were like, cool, we're the first one in industry to do this. We're the only one having that exchange. But what if we could take it a step further, right? So yes, now you have this water bottle filter, but that filtrant, right? Most people would just dispose of it. So if you look at Brita, some of them do have recycling programs, but most of that is thrown away. So what if we took that filtrant and turned it into a secondary byproduct and made it completely full circle? So we are the first product in market that takes it from, we take waste, turn it into something useful, and the waste that we produce, we turn that into green construction material. So our plaster material that you can put in houses is the first one to be a carbon sink. So as long as that material's on your walls, or on your buildings, it will be a carbon sink and continue to capture carbon as well as keep you safe from microorganisms or mold, as well as electrosmog, etc. So we are targeting water and air.
For my next house, I'm keeping a note when I build one.
Yeah, we're trying to be market competitive. So hopefully it'll cost you just as much.
So what gave you the idea? I know you're an innovator, but for this specific concept, where did that come from?
I had never really thought of water. Like water is a big issue, right? Like water, shelter, clean food, those are big issues, but they seem so big that I was never like, yeah, let me just target one of the biggest issues that every country's been thinking to solve. We actually started out of an innovation competition at Loyola University. And my co-founder back in our hometown in Hawaii, there was an oil spill caused by the US Navy. Red Hill is the exact oil spill that happened. And it happened right when we had started the competition. So we had originally thought about doing a few different ideas. And we were just like, all right, water's an issue. This is affecting families immediately. People that she knew, including her grandpa. And I was originally born in Pakistan, where, especially in my province of Sindh, it is a massive problem. We have one of the worst water in the entire world. So this is clearly a big connector for both of us. Why not try to target it? We pivoted. We've done everything. Our initial idea, if I remember correctly, was like trying to target, it was a renewable energy source, which targeted solar, wind, and thermal energy. It collected all three, turned it into clean water from the air, which is great, super innovative, awesome. We could have gotten so many patents, but in application, it would have been like what every other NGO is trying to do. You give poor people or people in need a very expensive tech that will need repairment, and they don't know how to repair. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to provide a technology that people could use, and it was so simple that was intuitive. Like, I don't need to have a mechanic come in and try to fix this. I can do this at home, which is why we scale down. Also, let's talk about the money. Building that out would have been very expensive. So we were like, all right, let's scale down. Let's go to bottles. We got our inspiration from Life Straw, but Life Straw is very basic and it only takes out microorganisms. So let's make a better Life Straw and make it less. I have some issues with Life Straw and how they originally marketed it. It was very like, oh, we're helping the poor and we have this very cheap, basic product. Cool. But just because you're poor, disenfranchised doesn't mean you should get a shittier quality product. So we wanted to give everyone the same amount of respect. And so we created like a more luxury version at the same competitive prices of Life Straw, but we take out a lot more contaminants.
There's a lot of iterations that I see. How long did that whole process take you from oil spill to the actual filter that you're using today?
Yeah. So the oil spill, when we first started, we were like, all right, let's do a disaster resilient product. So we can do natural disasters. We can do man-made disasters such as infrastructure failure. So like the lead pipe issue, that's very common in Illinois. And we're going to do all disasters. Very quickly with research, we realized, all right, every disaster means different types of contaminants, right? So if I'm in Ohio and I have a natural disaster there, most likely it's going to be agricultural contaminants, right? Runoff from farms versus if I have a disaster, let's say in St. Louis, then you have a lot more disasters from the ocean, right? A lot of that is coming over. Same with Florida. So we could not create one product that took out everything unless we made that product very expensive. So we were like, all right, let's start from the bare minimum. What is a disaster that's being faced across the United States? And we found out that was infrastructure failure specifically. So you got lead pipes, you have point contamination, etc. So we were like, let's target that first, establish ourselves, get in with these big first responders. Right now, we have a 2-time partnership with Habitat for Humanity. We're targeting both Rockford, Illinois, as well as Flint, Michigan. Both of those are in the news a lot. And we wanted to be the ones that were able to solve that problem, or at least make a dent in it. We condensed our problem. We focused on building the product. The amount of going back and forth with manufacturers took so long. That is a process I do not want to repeat. Supply chain concerns are very real in China right now. And that's a whole different problem with everything that's going on with their electricity going out and heat waves, etc. That made it a horrendous process, especially in the summer months. So doing all of that, it's been a year since we officially started working on this. And we have our launch in December. And our first pilot will be at the end of November, and that'll be in Flint, Michigan. And the Rockford pilot, it is in February. And the D2C launch is going to be December 1st. So we're there. We have just finished manufacturing. We have the last component to manufacture, and then we're ready to send our products out. So that's super exciting.
Congratulations. That is a phenomenal journey and a huge accomplishment.
Thank
So
you.
hats off to you. This is obviously something that's material. It's a startup that actually makes a widget. Can you talk briefly about your biggest learnings in terms of getting that product manufactured? Like just walk us through high level. What did you think going in? What were your biggest learnings? And then where do you end up at the other end of the process?
Yeah. So I guess one of the perks of being someone who's not a first time founder in hardware, I knew all the ups and downs. My background was in medtech, so biotech and like consumer products are a little different. You don't really have to raise around before you create a product. Well, that's required in medtech. You can't make a $1 million device without $1 million. I expected this process to be easier. There were a lot more hurdles than I originally expected because there was a chemistry aspect to it. So gaining access to a lab, making sure we could use those machines, learning how to use those machines, finding people who can help us with that. So that took a lot longer than I expected it to. But the actual manufacturing wasn't the most difficult process. The perks of consumer products is that there are a lot of manufacturers out there. And if you want to start very bare minimum and you don't want to create your own specific molds and your own like castings and stuff, you can outsource, which is very nice. To any founders who want to create a baseline product, start with a product that already exists. So go to Alibaba or some other international manufacturer, search up the products you want, find something that's similar and start that as your base and do iterations on top of it. That's something we did. We found a product that was semi-similar to what we wanted, and then we built on top of it. So then we went to M-Hub, that's like a manufacturing space here in Chicago, and we basically created our secondary components, which is the casing of the filters, the interior, all of that was created in-house. But if we hadn't gotten that initial product to just reverse engineer or figure out exactly what components we wanted, it would have costed us at least $10,000 for just a mold. And we were able to get that whole experimental phase done in under 3,000. And that included messing up, getting those parts, getting the machinery that we needed. So it saved us a lot of money. Did it take us a month or two longer than if we had just outsourced? Yes. But looking through like an investor lens, I would rather have a early start of spend those extra 2 months, create it in-house so they know how to do it. And then they can scale as needed rather than go straight and spend, because we had $20,000. We weren't working with a lot of money. So if we had spent half our money already, we wouldn't have gotten the 2 contracts because we can't create product. So was it the most time efficient decision? Probably not. But was it the best that we could have done in the moment? Yeah.
Absolutely. Which leads to the natural question. You talked about having $20,000. Where did you get the money? Talk us through the very, very earliest funding process.
Yeah. So initially, me and my co-founder were doing this out of pocket. We were both lucky enough to have jobs at the time while we were in school. So we were self-funding this project. I think we ended up putting in roughly like from ideation to creating a proof of concept, we only spent $600. So we were lean manufacturing, bootstrapping this as much as possible. Then we were fortunate enough to win a business pitch competition through Loyola. It was the Abrams Sustainability Grant. We won that. Awesome. Now we had $20,000 in our pocket. We got our first contract right after that with Habitat for Humanity, Genesee County. And then we spent basically the entire summer spending that money. We got the manufacturing, got lab space at 1871 and M-Hub. We grew our team. We went from a team of 2 people now to a team of 5. So we gave them some equity there. And then we got our second contract as of 2 weeks ago. So we were super excited about that too. To any new founders, I recommend use your resources. There are so many pitch competitions, innovation competitions, especially if you are the college age. People want to give money and there is money out there. It's just make sure that your idea is vetted out first. So we had applied to other competitions and we lost. Like it was so bad. Just because if you have an LOI in your pocket, you are 10 times more likely to win something than you just being an idea. And when we got our first contract with Flint, we didn't have a product. We pitched them on a vision. It was a very bad drawing and a vision. I was in his office being like, hey, we don't have anything. Our product is not tested. It doesn't even exist, but I can assure you it will do what it needs to do. And I need you to believe in me. You are selling yourself at that point. I was 100% selling our vision, our team, and some of our background for him to get, he signed, it was only $731, but it was a contract with Habitat for Humanity, which is one of the biggest nonprofit organizations in America. How we got that? A lot of luck and some good faith, but once you get that first contract, getting the second, third one isn't as difficult. And then it's just proving out your business model.
So were you intentional about, even though it was only $731, was that just fortuitous that you happened to get the biggest name? How did you go around finding which are the right people to pitch for your business, that is?
So we would have tried Red Cross or like Team Rubicon. Those are really big names too in our department. We were more scared to do that because it's like you get one shot with someone like Team Rubicon or Red Cross. And if you screw that up, even if you come years later, they'll have that in their head. To be completely honest, that's a great question to ask my co-founder. One day she was just like, we should do Habitat for Humanity and we should reach out to Flint. And I was just like, you sure? You want to reach out to one of the biggest water crises known in the United States and you want to pitch them a product that does not exist? That seems like such a smart idea. She was like, let's do it. I was like, cool, I'll jump on the call. I don't see this going anywhere. So our intent going in was like, we don't expect to get this contract. We would love you as an advisor. And we wanted to really build out a strong advisory board. So Genesee County's head person, we wanted to bring them on because they knew a lot about what a disaster looked like. And they knew the companies that were being supported. They knew the contractors. They knew the processes. So having someone like that on our team would have been super helpful. Turns out they liked us. They liked us enough to give us a contract. So that was pure good luck. There is nothing that I can sit here and tell you this is exactly what we did. That was just right time, right place. But I will give my co-founder enough credit that Megan Yamauchi, great person. The thing that Megan did was she wanted to create a good advisory board first. And that is something we had really pushed, which is how we got some interest from other contracts. And it was because of Flint that we got our secondary contract. So to any new founders, I'd be like, build your advisory board. They matter so much more than you think. And oftentimes they are the ones that might be your first contract, like open doors for you or even find you your first investor.
So talk to me about the advisory board. What was your intent going? Did you have an intention that said, we want this kind of advisory board with these many people, this skill profile?
Yeah, something that I don't know who told me this, but during my first ever, when I was 19, I was starting my first like real startup. They were like, whatever you lack in, your team should have. So as a founder, yes, I have technical skills. I don't know anything about water. I've never dabbled in water. I don't have a PhD in water. I don't know what water contaminants are besides like the initial, especially when I was starting. So I was like, all right, I need someone who is an expert in water. Like they must have a PhD. They have worked in the water industry. So we found someone like that. And we were lucky enough to get a strategic partnership with their company, who then became one of our manufacturers for our filter media, right? So Glamorous, we have one of their board members as our advisory board. After that, I was like, we would like someone who has a lot of connections within Chicago, especially in the investment field or opportunities that we can speak in. That's how we got another one of our advisors. So we made a list, top to bottom. Everything that we sucked at, we wanted to find someone who was better. That's somewhere where you really had to put your ego aside and literally find your biggest flaws. What are your weakest points? And find someone who is 10 times better than you. And I believe that even on the team level, I hired my team members because they are better than me. My lead engineer is 10 times a better engineer than I can be ever. And that's why I hired him. My co-founder, she is so much more organized than I am. She's really good at the nitty gritty stuff. That is why she is my co-founder. I feel like founders always think they have to be the best on their team. And there's this like ego attached to like, oh, I'm better than this. The team exists because of me. No, if any of my team members left, that would be my like entire company leaving. Like this team does not exist without my co-founder. It does not exist without my engineers and my sustainability operators, etc. So team is everything in a startup, and especially your advisory board.
Very illuminating. You've identified person X. You have an amazing expertise or something that you need, an asset that you need. What happens? Do you just cold pitch them? Do you approach them through a network? Like what happens?
My experiences have probably not been like others. I have done like a lot of cold pitching. I'm just like, what's the worst they can say? No, right? It's like they say no, we move on. LinkedIn has banned me multiple times for the amount of times I've reached out to people. I'm not afraid. I will reach out to be like, hey, you are an expert in your field. I have heard a lot about you. You don't know me. You don't know I exist, but I know everything about you. I know your background. I know where you live. I know where you worked. I know your hobbies, interests. So let me give you a proposal. You work for me. I give you this much equity. If you don't like it, cool. If you love it, we increase you and give you a position of power later. It's worked great. We have been able to find a lot of people who are super passionate, but it has also led us to almost getting sued. So it's a give or take, finding people who understand what startups mean. Startups mean you don't get money. So it does have to be very much about they're passionate about seeing a change. I'm in a social venture, so it's even more weird because it's like, hey, do you not care about people? Do you not care about water? So then you can like really build up that guilt tripping. I mean, hey, use your assets, right? That's how we brought in a lot of advisors. It has been like, hey, we're a social venture. You should really help us. We're poor and we're trying to help the world be a better place. Do you want that on your moral conscience that you were so mean that you wouldn't help someone who wanted to help people? So, yeah, that's basically it.
That resonates very highly with me for various reasons. So you're doing all this amazing stuff, pretty spunky if you ask me. Did you have any concerns jumping in about ever being an entrepreneur, or was it just, I like it, I'm going to do it?
I've realized that the older you get, the more the fear set in, which I wish it didn't. Like 19-year-old me, she dropped out of college for this. She was so dead set about being an entrepreneur. The older I'm getting, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be like the breadwinner for my family, right? Like my mom relies on me. I need to bring in money soon. So there's that fear that kicks in. I'm South Asian, right? I have a very traditional home, not the most stable home. So my mom does depend on me financially. My brother might be depending on me financially too. So it is very important that I am able to bring in money. So I do want founders to know, like, you don't have to quit your day job. I go to school full time. I also work 30 hours in corporate and I run startups. So it's like, you can do it all. You may not have a social life, but it is possible. And don't give up on that. To call specifically was very different. It is the first social venture I've done. While I wanted to help and save the world, I never thought I would be doing a social venture specifically. Like when you hear social venture, you'll think of like Tom's, like the shoes. That's what it's called. Yeah, it's a buy one, give one model. Or it's like everyone thinks NGO. If I wanted to run an NGO, I would go and run an NGO. Like I'm here, yes, because I want to make money. But I do think that there's an interesting dichotomy between like entrepreneurship and like a failing economic democracy that we're seeing in America. Not to get like too theoretical, but like in order to have like sustainable, dynamic, and like an interconnected democratic society, I do think social entrepreneurship is very important because it takes up all the shortcomings of the government. The government, no matter how much we invest in work towards making a perfect government, it will never be perfect. It will never meet everyone's needs. And that is where entrepreneurs need to step up. And yes, I am very involved governmentally and like politically, but there's also a point where it's like, what can we as the people do? And it's time to step up because these are our problems and only our communities can solve them. Trust me, I have no interest in sitting in the lab all day or busting my ass after classes and after work and being like, yeah, I'm going to solve one of the biggest problems in America. This was not some Miss America, we can change the world complex that I had. It was because no one else was stepping up to the plate. This wasn't a choice that me or Megan had. This was a necessity for our communities. This was going to affect my family if I didn't step up and solve the problem. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they're working day in and day out, you forget that, right? You forget your vision and your mission. And there's been so many times I've wanted to quit. It's so easy to want to quit when the funding's not coming in, when your product's failing, when your launch goes bad or your pilot goes bad. It is so easy, especially in hardware, especially if you're like a disenfranchised like entrepreneur, whether you're a woman, person of color, etc. It's so easy to just be like, all the cards are stacked against me. It would be so much easier just to go to corporate, sell my soul, work for like 20 years and then retire, right? Have a nice paying job. My resume is built for that. I can easily do that. It's just, there's that little voice inside of you that keep going. It's not over. It's not over until you absolutely lose. Do not quit on a bad day. That is my biggest mantra. If there's one thing that I can have something like written down and stamped on every wall, it'd be do not quit on your bad day. Wait until the next good day. And if you still hate it, then you have the right to quit. But you owe it to yourself to at least continue until the next good day.
That's great advice. I think I'll take it myself. So then coming down to, you mentioned many of the challenges with hardware, with getting customers. How are you thinking about building a business model? What was the economic foundation? Can you talk about how you thought through the economic or the financial building blocks of your business first?
The business model was difficult because we had gone back and forth. Do we want to be a direct to consumer product? We tried to go down the direct to consumer route, right? Which is, hey, let's be a Brito household name. You can compete against everyone, right? But that market, especially in my opinion, the direct to consumer market is very oversaturated right now. Everyone has a direct to consumer product, especially during COVID. Everyone wanted to start their own business. And yes, the water filtration market isn't that bad, but you are competing against giants. These people have more money than you can ever dream of. And for a new startup, that's not smart. So we're like, what are other markets we can go down? Well, if we were so determined to help the post-disaster situation, then why not go towards first responders? That is how we were like, all right, government, that's a thing. So are nonprofits. And we really leaned into that whole government aspect. There are so many public health, like different government departments are for public health or disasters. The issue with that is becoming a government contractor is a very long and tedious process, and that won't be instant. It's something you can work towards, but that will take you years to get to, especially when you're starting from scratch. So we knew that, yes, well, we can aim towards that, like becoming that product that Red Cross uses, becoming the product that FEMA uses when there's a disaster. It is just not realistic right now. That is when we decided, okay, we want to do government, we can't get there. And we could do direct to consumer, but it's oversaturated and we're competing against big names like Pure and Brita. And they're great products for what they do, but they aren't addressing the big concern, which is infrastructure failure. So we were like, all right, let's find the middle ground. That was NGOs for us. NGOs are often the first people on site, and they are the ones that kind of carry communities to safety. So if you look at Habitat for Humanity, when the Flint crisis happened, they were one of the nonprofits that were actually giving out filters. Most other churches and stuff were kind of giving out bottles, but they weren't giving out filters itself. So NGOs will try to give you more sustainable options. There's things like Team Rubicon, which are first like disaster responders. So having filters embedded into their solution in the future would be awesome. Same with Red Cross. They are also trying to become less, Red Cross specifically has a new theme of becoming more disaster preventative rather than just responsive. And that's something we want to push into people, like stop reacting to a disaster. Just be prepared if a disaster happens so you don't have to completely switch over. There are times where me and my co-founder were yelling at the top of our lungs, going back and forth. Deciding a business model was not, because then you have to choose like how much of your ethics are you willing to give up to make money? Because if you don't make money, your business isn't a business, it's a nonprofit. So we did have to make money, but it's also like, how much morality are we willing to smudge so we can make the money, so we can become a better product? It's like that titter tatter going back and forth. So at the end, we were like, cool, let's do NGOs. Those are our big contracts. Those are our $1,000 contracts that are written down. It also is natural publicity. We did not want to spend any money marketing. First of all, because we didn't have the money to market. But secondly, do I want to be a TikTok fad, something that comes in and then goes away? Or do I want to be something that's trusted by the government? If I wanted to be trusted by the government, the easiest way was to get in through nonprofits. Because let's be honest, these nonprofits are being funded by the government. So if I'm already a contractor with them, wouldn't that just make it an easier route? So you got natural marketing. You have a easy route to the end goal. You have a non-saturated market because most of the competitors we're competing against are like Nestle. Nestle is great, but Nestle isn't a filter maker. They are a water bottle manufacturer. You're competing against P&G, which makes those like chlorine tablets. Again, they don't make filters. 3M and a few other competitors do exist, but most of them are big structures, not contained bottles. Such as when the Mississippi crisis happened, they were going for smaller structures that they can use. Unfortunately, there's two competitors in the market, right? So we would have been a stronger competitor that doesn't just take out the bacteria, which E. coli was one of the contaminants, but also take out all the other contaminants that the people were suffering from. So it was just the easiest route with the most long-term benefits for us.
I just love this whole conversation. It's just so informative. And then obviously the moment you pick your business model that ties you into certain choices and closes out certain other choices on things like pricing.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your pricing, the thinking around pricing, the philosophy, and how you came up with a pricing strategy?
Yeah, so pricing is an interesting concept, at least for me. As a woman founder, I was like, oh, are we charging too much? I feel bad. Like, it's a mentality of like taking up less space, right? Like, oh, would anyone want to buy us? Yeah, we're better. We're more eco-friendly, but like, is it a better, like, should we charge this much? Everyone we would talk to would be like, why are you only charging $15 for a product you could easily charge $40 for? So we were like, oh, you're right. Maybe we should stop undermining our products. So pricing for us is divided into two different categories. We have our NGO and governmental pricing. And on the other hand, we have our direct to consumer. Since we are doing both markets with less of an emphasis on direct to consumer, our prices are tremendously much higher. If I remember correctly, the retail price for our direct to consumer bottle is about $40, $45. And then on the other hand, for NGO, it is merely $20. And the reason for this was primarily to ensure that people who need the product can afford it. And then people who are getting it more for like luxury purposes, we can make a little more profit margin on that. And hey, if you can convince your local nonprofit to get you the cheaper model, even better. Like, it's not for us to necessarily stop you from getting the cheaper price. It is more to ensure that people who are either prepping for a disaster or are suffering through one right now have first serve on those products, as well as like at a price range that they can afford. So we do make profit margins on both of them, and both of them are around like 40+%, which is not bad for a hardware device. But yeah, pricing was something we had gone back and forth plenty of times with a lot of our advisors. We really did appreciate the input, as well as like some of the accelerator programs that we talked to or applied to. A lot of them did give feedback to us about the pricing for our hardware. And to support and supplement it, we started offering other things. So for pilots, we offered a lot of like consulting services, for lack of a better word. And this included, do you want to get the water tested? Do you want us to create a case study? We're doing this anyways for you. Might as well start charging you for it, so it can add more supplemental costs for you. So yeah, our most recent pilot, we got them to pay for a case study. We got them to pay for like actual testing of the water, so you can see those changes, because it does benefit them. The more data that they have and see the efficiency of this pilot, the more funding they can get from the government or from other sources. Like, hey, we ran this pilot for our community members, and look, now they have clean water. This is how much contaminations we were able to remove. So the more data we can give them, the better. So why not make that a service? And that's something I recommend to all founders. Like, there are so many other ways to make money for your business that may not be your main goal. Like, we're coming out with an app soon. I am not a software person, and my company is making an app, and we're charging $2.99 for that app. Just be open to it. Don't pigeonhole yourself into like one product or one service.
And just on that point, I'm really curious. You mentioned that, women tend to want to take up less space. How did you get over that hang up? What was that magic switch that helped you feel comfortable to charge what the product was worth?
That's a very good question. I'll be completely honest. I don't think it was one moment or one event that occurred that magically flipped the switch for me. I've been trying to be more assertive. I feel like women have this bad connotation, like, oh, if you're assertive or you demand too much from a client, then you're going to come off as bossy or bitchy. And I've heard all the words, right? If a man says it, he knows his worth, right? If a woman says it, then all of a sudden she's expecting too much. And that shows especially with investments. Like, when we first started raising our round, we were like, should we just raise $50,000? That seems like enough. We're a hardware company. We are a hardware company raising our pre-seed rounds. When I told a fellow founder this, and his idea is like in the similar like space, right? He does air stuff. We do water stuff. But he was like, oh, only 50K? Like, I raised $500,000. And I was just like, you did what now? Someone paid you $500,000 for that? Like, his idea is great, but it's like, it's all outsourced, right? So it's not anything that he's building himself. And I was just like, oh, that's interesting. Shit, maybe I should raise my prices too. So it was like that conversation. I'm like hearing like, oh God, if I could tell you all the stories of incompetent founders that have raised money or got people to pay them thousands of dollars for literally a copy and paste program. They created a software, which was like 10 other softwares that I've seen. Nothing really different besides the name. And they got clients to pay for it at twice the rate. And I was just like, wow, it really is a confidence game. If you smile good and you put on a face, you can, oh gosh, you can sell people almost anything. So it just became like, I can sit here and I can continue to undermine myself and have a lack of confidence, or I can go out there and, if not for myself, for the people that I'm serving. If you have this fear of being able to stand up for yourself, would you stand up for your friend? If your mom or your sister or your brother or someone else you loved was in that position and they were undermining yourself, would you stand up for them? You probably would, right? Hence, do it for yourself as if it was for someone else. For me, it is the communities that I'm serving. If I don't get the money I need, if I don't sell these products, then they continue to suffer. So now it's like this moral conscience, like, am I going to be a shitty person to like thousands of millions of people because I don't have the guts to just stand up and ask for the money I need? Or am I going to step up to the plate and ask for what I'm worth? As a founder, I've pulled through in $20,000. We've started this company, right? And it's a hardware-based company. We've managed to make these partnerships. We got these contracts. We got LOIs before even having a product. If you don't find that impressive, then I probably don't want to work with you.
I love it. I am just blown away. So that leads to a fantastic question in terms of funding. So you talked about kind of these non-dilutive grants, competitions. You mentioned that you had a very varied experience with pitch competitions. That's a good source of funding for some. What were the ones that worked well, and what did you learn from the ones that didn't work well that could be learnings for others?
So just to give some context to the listeners, I work as a corporate venture capitalist analyst. So I'm in the VC world. So not only do I serve as a founder, but I'm also a VC for hardware technology, basically. And I can guarantee you, do not go to a corporate VC unless your product is way further along. Because we've been approached by products that are pre-seed or seed round. It's not worth it. Also, depending on the VC, especially depending on the corporation, they may try to steal your idea. And I'm sure that your patent does not stand against some of these strong as lawyers, right? That these corporations have. So now my company, great. We're very moral. We're awesome. It's a small knit community. So it's awesome. But I do know a lot, especially in biotech and medtech. There's some big names that I've seen steal ideas and that won't sign NDAs. And as a founder, you're like, oh, how do I get a corporation to start your NDA? No, your NDA is worth nothing. Be very careful on who you tell your idea to. To other founders, doesn't really matter. But if you're telling your idea to a corporation or a big VC, most of them will not sign an NDA. So know exactly what you're walking into and make sure your ideas are patented. That's number one that I just wanted to get out of the way. But besides that, you would be surprised on how many people don't apply to US government challenges. So US government has a bunch of challenges that they just post. And a lot of people do not apply to them. I applied. I spent 30 minutes on the application and we won. Challenge.gov, tons of challenges, totally worth it. Then after that, you have your SBIR grants. So SBIR and STTR, most people know about them. They're small business grants from the government. Totally recommend applying. If you want something that's on the lower side in terms of intensity, DoD grants are usually shorter. EPA grants are about 25 pages. Find a department that works for you and your product. The perks, if you don't know, AFWERX is AFWERX. AFWERX is a Air Force grant, and it's just about dual use technology. Can your technology be used in the real world as well as the Air Force? So if you have any technology that has that application, whether it's wearables or something in energy, or even like a consumer product that would have a use for Air Force, I recommend applying. It's 3 pages. That's it. And a 20-page deck, which most people already have. Totally worth applying. And it's $50,000. So that is one of the fastest SBIR grants there are. On the other hand, you have STTR grants. You have a higher chance of winning those, but you do need a university partnership. So if you are a student or a master student, go to a professor, right? And find out whether their research or they're willing to take on new research. That is the best way to do it. I'd even say if you're an alumni of a university, you can apply to those. Now, SBIRs and STTRs can have some regulations on who can apply. Some do require to be a US citizen or a green card holder. That is mainly for the DoD, the Department of Defense. Most other departments don't care. As long as you are a resident or you're legally allowed to be here, your visa holds, you're fine. That is where having other people on your team can really help. And let's say you're a solo founder. I have been there, done that. It is okay. Get contractors. The grants itself do not care. They don't know who is on your team versus who is a contractor. So you go up to a contractor, be like, hey, if I get this contract, I will pay you hourly, which is what you have to do anyways. So why does it matter? Go find the best contractor you can, put them on your team, and apply for the grant. No one's going to know the difference. Besides that, on more of a college and even high school level now. There's a lot of pitch competitions. There's hackathons. That is how I started with my first competition. We won a few different hackathons, but apply to hackathons. Do like one part of your idea at a different hackathon every time. You can win hundreds and thousands of dollars or like free stuff or memberships and stuff. And it gets your name out there, right? Because we won a JP Morgan challenge as well. So I got to talk to the JP Morgan people and start that network. So totally recommend hackathons, recommend any pitch competitions that your school has. MIT has one for anyone who's 24 years and under. I think Stanford has another one. They're everywhere. And some of them don't require you to be a student. So apply to them as an adult. Yeah, challenge.gov, SBIRs, and probably hackathons and stuff are probably the big ones that I can think of from the top of my head.
And these are just excellent pointers. Do you know of a one-stop resource that lists all of these that you find handy that others could too?
I don't think there is, but now you got me motivated to make one on my LinkedIn. So I might start compiling it, and then you can feel free to tag that Excel.
You mentioned briefly the corporate VC sector. To the extent that you've done funding or thinking of doing funding, what does that process look like kind of post where you're at now? And what are your thoughts on how to do that effectively?
Yeah, so funding is an interesting giant, right? There are so many ways to do it. And anyone who tells you there is a right way to raise funding is bullshitting. There is no right way to fundraise. As someone who's served as an analyst, I've seen companies that have done all their fundraising through grants, and we funded them. On the other hand, there are companies that have just done rounds or found a daddy investor, where it's this one rich person that they have been milking away, right? So there's no right or wrong way to invest, and it's very much dependent on your business model as well as your needs. I can talk from personal experience. Tech Hall, we started off, we were we want to raise a VC round. We started off with 50,000 and went up to 500,000. We brought it down to 250K. So there's different rounds. Really quickly, you got your pre-seed, seed, Series A, B, C, and it keeps on going. And that Series C, very few companies. Usually at that point, you're going public or you have most money to sustain yourself. So there, you can do loans. You can do grant funding, which is very popular. Grant funding can include private grants, such as the Abrams grant that we won. It can include government grants, such as challenge.gov or SBIRs, SCTRs. Then you have your friends and family. That is a big round for a lot of people. Now, if you are broke like me, everyone around me is poor too. I didn't exactly grow up very privileged. So I couldn't exactly go to my mom, who's a housewife, and be like, hey, you want to give me $50,000 or Trump said, a small loan of $1 million. I can't exactly do that. My mom would slap me on the face and then tell me to go get a job, which she has done in the past. So I could not raise a friends and family round. That wasn't very sustainable. So we kind of had to skip that one. Then there is going to an angel. This is very important. I think people overlook angels. They go to VC firms and they forget that angels exist. Angels can be hey, I know this person who has a rich dad who's in this semi-close field to us, or it can be an actual angel fund. Hide Angels is very popular in Chicago. There's someone that we're also looking into, but there can also be individual angels. So a big mistake that people do is they try to find an angel in their field. So if I am in water, I will try to find an angel in water. That doesn't really happen. Now you can broad up and be hey, I'm a social venture. I'm going to try to find a social venture angel, which is a good place to start. You will probably find a lot of crossover. I would tell founders to go even a step further and be I am an angel, or I'm a founder that's in water and social ventures. Now, technically, I'm also a consumer product. Technically, I'm also in public health. And technically, I'm also a minority. So let's find an angel that has any crossover, because they may not be a direct product, but I am related enough that you can maybe help me improve my business model, or you can connect me to someone who has an application. There's also the whole courting an angel process, which is something I can get into some other time. But it's basically, think of finding an angel like dating. If I just come up to you and I'm hey, you want to go on a date with me? Do you want to get married? You'd be freaked out, right? So do not go up to an angel and be hey, you want to give me $500,000? It's not going to work. You have to treat it like dating. It's a slow relationship. If it's cold to reach out, do not ask for money. Ask for advice. You ask for advice, you get money. And if it's a warm intro, which is the best kind of intro you can get, you can be hey, we are thinking about raising a round in the near future. We would love any feedback. Go through their portfolio, figure out, that's the thing. Research will pay off so hard. research their portfolio, stalk them, figure out what their interests are. Be like, hey, I know recently you posted on LinkedIn about your interest in the Mississippi water crisis. Fun fact, I run a water company and we're trying to address the crisis like Mississippi. So we would love feedback from someone as prestigious as you. Compliments go such a long way. I need you to kiss ass every single second and be someone who compliments, especially if it doesn't come naturally to you. Don't make it awkward. Don't be like, oh, you're amazing and I love what you do and blah, blah, blah. No, just make it natural. Hey, I saw this, you're interested. I think that's great. There should be more angels that are in this field because this is a growing field. I love that you want to pave the road for a lot of other individuals within your sector. So if you have time, I would love to take you out for coffee and discuss what you think is the future of this field. Try to understand where they sit in your market and industry, and then figure out if they can be of any help. And that's how you try to get into funding. And then you have your traditional venture capitalists, which everyone talks about. And then you have your corporate VCs. Corporates talked about less. If you want to do a buyout or a walkout, corporate's great. They will most likely buy out a significant portion of your company, or they will just buy the entire company. So that's great if you're later stages. Anything under Series A, I don't even recommend going to them because most of them will not take you seriously unless if you've won multiple grants from the US government, in which case then it's a little different and you have more basis to stand on.
Clearly, you've just done a lot in a short amount of time. What have been some external challenges that you've faced that maybe are over and above just those of being a founder?
I started pretty young. The first time I started a company, which blew up and failed, was at the age of 16. At the age of 19, I started my first medtech company, which raised over $1.5 million. I don't know if every founder gets growth after a pitch, but I got growth after a pitch. And, that seems to be not a common thing that happens amongst a lot of the men founders I talk to. So yeah, I can sit down and tell you all the stories of people not taking me seriously. I'll email them and I'll talk to them digitally and they will think I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And the second they find out my age, I was 19, did not have a PhD, but I can talk as if I've had it. In my sectors, I know what I'm talking about, or I would not be a CEO. So I can talk to you as if I know my field and I know everything that goes into it. And I've done the research, obviously, like any founder should. But then ageism would be a role that would play. Oh, you're too young. Or have you considered going back to school or going into corporate for a few years before you come back? I was like, so you think I'm smart? You like my ideas? You think I'm capable? But the problem is my age. When if anything, it should be an asset because, I can work harder. I can work longer hours. I don't have the liability of kids or a family or anything like that. Then there is the whole, if you're feminine presenting in the VC world, that will be held against you. Or it was, at least when I was younger. I have been groped by VCs. I have been told oh, let the real innovator talk, referring to my co-founder at the time, who did not work on this idea, who was only doing software, and I had built out the entire hardware component, but I was not allowed to speak in my own meeting. So that was very fun. I have been asked out on dates after meetings. I have been forced to go on dates to lock in deals, which I ended up not doing. So it's been your whole sexuality and gender gets held against you. And then the same VCs are like, oh, we want to see women succeed. We want to invest in more women founders, are the ones that will hold you being a woman against you. Even recently, I had an investor who held the fact that we were younger, that we were in school against us, or my socioeconomic background is not like a lot of founders, right? I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I did not grow up with daddy's money. In fact, daddy didn't have money. He was bankrupt constantly. And I'm a immigrant woman who, you can bring in everything into this, like my gender, my sexuality, my this, my that. I just did not fit into any mold. And then you have these people that are like, oh yeah, but you're different. Investors like different. Look at all these investors who are interested in investing in different founders and unique founders. I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Because at the end of the day, investors care about one thing, and that's making the most profit. And is someone who is so different going to make them more profit? On paper, no. Sure, I may be more connected to the community. I may know more than my peers. I may be more accelerated in this. No one sits here and asks you all these questions. When you analyze someone, and I've been on the other end, when you analyze someone, it's so quick, right? You look at 4 different categories. Is this person educated? How does this person present? And it's so subconscious and it's so quick that even I have to call people out on it. And like when we hire, I am calling myself out on it because it's so easy to do. Because you have this mold. What is a perfect employee? What is a perfect founder? What is a perfect like investor? It is so easy to just try to shove people into those molds. And the second they don't fit, oh, I don't like them. Why? Because I don't. They're not good. Something about them. But what? And then you start thinking of those reasons like, oh, the fact that she has a family or she's a little young or she's still in college. Then you start coming up with like useless excuses that you would not hold against someone who maybe was a different socioeconomic background, different demographic. A great example is I know a founder who got a lot of money recently over last year. And he was still in college when he was running this company. Nothing was held against him. The fact that he was still in college. And that's a big deal that a lot of investors was like, we want you to drop out of college. That's great if you don't need college as a backup. And for me, I was paying out of pocket. So I can't exactly leave $60,000 of debt and not complete that thing. And I'm so close to graduation, right? So he got funded. I did not get funded. Our backgrounds were the same. We had the same amount of experience, yet he got funded for a similar idea. So it's very interesting to kind of see that drastic perspective change. And there's so many studies that prove it. Like I can sit here and be like, oh, it's all in my head. It doesn't exist. And I hate pulling that card. And I'm the last one who's going to be like, oh yeah, they didn't take me because I'm old. I hate it. I hate making excuses because I'm very much like work hard, pull yourself up from the bootstraps, etc. But like the studies don't lie. They've done double-blind studies where it's like you're given the same resume, change the name, one's a woman, one's a man, you will choose the man. So it's like, at what point is it all in your head and like, you playing the minority card versus things are actually happening? And then there are investment firms that are more minority-based who are run by people who are minorities. Honestly, I think they hold minorities to a higher standard than they hold white people. Like you will hold your own kind to such a higher standard than you will hold like someone who doesn't look like you because you want them to be better and you don't want them to let you down or lower the standard of what a Black founder or what a brown founder will look like. So it's like, are you really helping the community that you say to be helping, or are you just holding them to an unrealistic standard? Because they probably didn't start off the same way that your fellow white man started off, who's like in startup. Most likely he had someone who was in business or he got help or support from his family. I can't raise a friends and family around. I can't do that. I can't quit working. I had a person who told me like, oh, you should just quit everything and just get paid from your startup. And I'm like, I need you to I need you to re-say that to me and think about the words that you're saying. You want me to quit my job? You want me to quit school and have my startup pay me while I'm trying to raise my pre-seed round, and you're an investor? Like, do you just not understand math? Where's this amount of money coming in where you want me to pay me for my own startup and pay everyone else in my startup with a startup that just started? What part of startup do you not understand? Like, is English the problem or is math the problem? Yeah, I've had some very interesting conversations with investors. It's been a doozy. Do not recommend. Okay, real talk. If I could quit, I would. Like I have been so close to wanting to quit startups so many times. And every single time I just get sucked back in. At this point, it's this like toxic obsession that I have. And if I could quit, I would. I don't want anyone to be so obsessed with startups and like making a change as much as I am. It's very unhealthy. I've sabotaged relationships. I have quit things. Like this need of like making a change and doing good in the world is so overwhelming. And if I genuinely could rip it out of my body, I would, because I'd be so much richer. I would be living a stress-free life in corporate. It's like a necessity, like it pulls you towards it and it's not healthy. And I know it's not healthy. Oh, burnout is like my middle name at this point. Constantly, I'm living in a constant state of burnout, but there's no other choice for me. It's like breathing. I have to do it.
So that's what keeps you going then in the dark moments?
That and the faith that there is going to be something better somehow, some way, and things are going to work out. I have a saying that the world runs on good people and the hope of a better tomorrow. And I'm not allowed to quit on my bad days. I'm not allowed to quit when things are hard and my back's against the wall because, desperate situations lead to desperate actions. And if I act out of a state of desperation rather than a state of abundance, then I'm going to make the worst decision, because then your survival instincts are kicking in. When you're in flight or fright, flight or I cannot speak today. When you're in flight or fight responses, you are acting out of an instinct, which can be based in paranoia. It can be based in anxiety. It can be based in trauma. And it's not based out of like your logical mentality. So no, even if today I lost everything, right? And we were forced to run to call from the ground up again, I would be forced to continue. And not because I want to redo all of this or find a new product or any of it. It's just because you don't quit when it's hard. It will get better. And oftentimes I see founders quit that are right there. They're at the cusp of making it and they quit just too early. Like most founders don't fail because they run out of money. They fail because they quit too early. And I don't want to be one of those founders.
I have a hunch that you won't be one of them. That's just a hunch.
Fingers crossed. I could use all the good prayers.
And you got them. Have there been highlight moments where everything was worth it, or just that adrenaline flow, or anything that was a highlight reel that just said, you know what, this is why I do this?
If you ask my therapist, she would say that I don't celebrate the good moments enough. But probably the last time where I was like, yeah, this is worth it, was for a Flint pilot, especially because it was our first pilot. We wanted to go all out. And part of that was flying, like going down to Flint. We drove. I didn't bring a car and I didn't bring any cash on me. So it was a very interesting trip. Anyways, once I got there, I was sleep deprived. I was running on 2 hours of sleep. We had our first interview with an actual person that we would be piloting with. And dude, it just broke my heart. Just hearing how much for years, the Flint crisis started in 2014 and it's still not really over. And not everyone's been addressed to. Just hearing all the suffering in their voice. One of the participants, their son died as a cause of the Flint water crisis. And he developed this horrendous life-threatening skin condition. And that could have been prevented. If the government hadn't lied and hid that information, if people had stepped up when they needed to, we could have had someone who didn't have to pass away. There are kids there with permanent neurological damage. They had to make a center for the amount of children that suffered neurological damage because of the water crisis. The amount of lead was so high. There is permanent damage to these children now. There are people that we talked to that were disabled because of the water crisis. Water is a necessity, and we made it this commodity that's, oh, if you're rich enough, you get it. And if you're poor, well, suck it up, fuck you. And this is seen in every state over and over again. This is a preventable issue. We chase, like, when it comes to politics, we chase all the flashy things, right? But like infrastructure is what keeps our country running. And we don't want to invest in infrastructure when it comes to people. Because I had someone tell me like, oh, why don't you just release a product that hasn't been tested? And I'm like, because that means that you're risking people's lives. And then their response was, what are they going to do? Sue you? They're too poor. And to actually talk to those people, and the people we talked to, they were mixed, right? They were white, they were Black, they were Hispanic, and it was like a mixed group, but all of them face the same discrepancies because of their socioeconomic background. And that's a sad reality. Like, money speaks. Talking to someone who had family members pass away because of this, it just wakes something up inside of you. And like, I was so exhausted at that time. We were facing all the supply chain concerns. Like, our product got delayed. We had to do changes. We had a team member leave. Hated working. And that happened. And it was just like, all right, I don't have an excuse. Because if I don't do something now and at least put an option out there in the market for someone to help their families, then this will happen again. And it did. What, like 1 month ago, the Mississippi crisis happened, and it's going to happen again. Flint wasn't the first thing to happen, and it won't be the last. And it's going to keep on repeating itself because history repeats itself unless you do something to change it. And that's where I was like, all right, our team has to do something to change it. We may not fix the problem, but we're sure as hell are going to give it our best try.
And we're rooting for you. What parting words would you give someone who is further behind you, earlier in the journey, trying to make a go of entrepreneurship?
For me, like, Entrepreneurship is like more than just making money, right? There are entrepreneurs who are in it to make the money, and more power to you. I cannot speak on their behalf, right? I can speak to you on the behalf like impact. And for me, even when I was in med tech, it was so I can help people like my mom and her osteoporosis. That's why we went into med tech. And now with water, it's so I can help these communities. Impact has always been the driver. And as someone who is an impact driven person, it's not easy because the entrepreneurship world isn't made for impact. Let's be honest. If you look at very successful companies, they have made incremental changes and have never been the first company in the market. They have been a company who just did it a little better at the right time. And that's what makes most of the successful companies, right? And those are the companies that investors will back. So if you are an impact driven person, you have all the odds against you. And if you're a hardware person, you have all the odds against you. And there's a reason that 95, 99%, whatever the statistic is, of people fail when they start a business. And let's be honest, a very depressing stat is that less than 1% of all VC money that is given out is given to women. That stat is even lower if you're a woman of color. So it's not going to be easy. And if you're in the hardware space, it's going to be even harder. But you have to have something that wakes you up in the morning and makes you want to try every single day. And I always find it funny when people are like, oh, start your own business, like do what you love. I don't love this. Like, bro, I can tell you when I'm spending 6 hours in the lab a day after working a full shift, I do not love being there. Like it isn't like, I'm 23 years old. I should be going out, like partying, enjoying my best life, doing like stupid stuff. And here I am trying to build something from the ground up. And it's not easy. And please don't go in with this with the expectation it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard. If it's not hard, I'd be concerned. If you aren't suffering just a little bit, I'd genuinely be very concerned about you. Like you cannot be mentally sane and want to work this many hours. I pull 120 hour work weeks, 120 hours of just constantly being at it. And I'm not saying it's healthy. It's not, but you're doing it for a bigger cause than yourself. And sure, you may be sabotaging your sleep. And yes, it's going to screw up my REM cycle and I'll probably die 30 years earlier. But think about the long-term impact. Like me doing this and suffering for just a few years could maybe save a kid. It could make sure that a family never has to say goodbye to a family member early. It could mean that maybe I'm going to help a mom who then one day births a child that saves the world. Who knows? Like somewhere down the line, the good karma is going to come back. So do it for that. Do it for the team, right? Do it for the change you can make. Just keep going. It's so hard. I know it is. Trust me, I'm right there with you. I want to give up every other day, but just keep going because it does get easier. I lied. It doesn't get easier, but it makes it worth it. Somewhere down the line, you will look back and the dots will connect and it'll be 100% worth it. Just don't let other people's voices get to your head because they will, and they're going to be loud. And there's going to be moments where you're going to have to put your earbuds in, put your head down, put your hood up, and just say why you started this in the first place. And that will keep you going.
This has been one of the most inspiring, moving conversations I've had to date. So thank you very much, Tayyaba. This has just been amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time and maybe losing another hour of sleep. So this is really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All the best.
Yes. And if any of them want to connect with me, they can reach out on LinkedIn and I'm more than happy to sit down over a coffee or over a Zoom call and help out anyone because that's how I started. Good karma. Pass it along.
Thank you very much. My conversation with Tayyaba was extremely moving, inspirational, and frustrating all at once. The frustration came from hearing about the many challenges bright women like her face purely because of entrant stereotypes in the startup universe. But the lessons were many. 3 stood out in my mind for their sheer resourcefulness and brilliance, all showing how a determined entrepreneur can move impossible barriers to create the kind of impact you'd expect from a much larger company. First, Tayyaba leveraged little-known funding sources that had the potential to get her big amounts of money with reasonable effort and relatively high odds. The bonus was that the money came with zero dilution of her equity. These grants were critical to help her invest in the activities that would enable her to launch her product. Second, her go-to-market strategy was very clever. She positioned the product in a space that had the least direct competition with the 800-pound gorillas in her business, and also to a customer niche that came with built-in credibility. This catapulted her reach and ability to sign on new and big customers. That was brilliant. Last but not least, she approached pricing in a way that would optimize her margins and avoid placing her most vulnerable customers in a difficult situation. And yet it gave her company the flexibility to access customers who'd be more than happy to pay a premium price for a great product. In fact, every move that we talked about felt like that of a master chess player in a really challenging game. She was always short of time and money, but used her ingenuity, commitment to her mission, and every skill she could learn or co-opt to maximize the firepower that her business could command. Where can you apply this kind of chess grandmaster thinking in your business so you too can 10x your results? Thanks for listening to today's episode. We have show notes and more at achieve.co. That's ACHIIV.co/podcast. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe and share with a friend. See you on the next episode. Now, go be an achiever.